Peace and love, everyone. Welcome to the Healing Cypher Show. I'm your host, Queen Tamara, and welcome back to my channel. If you're new, please like and subscribe. I hope everyone is doing wonderful and surrounded by love on this moon day, October the 9th. And this is a special day. It's known as Indigenous Peoples Day. It had a previous name for a special day years ago, and they changed it in honor of our indigenous people and their ancestors. And so now it's Indigenous Peoples Day. And this is something that I totally support and recognize and strive to honor each year because it is significant and it is important to me. And anyway, so it's Indigenous Peoples Day, and I hope everyone is feeling well out there. Please don't forget to hit that subscribe button. So, indigenous means of inhabiting, existing in a land from the earliest times. So, the term indigenous is very inclusive of a lot of different groups of people and ethnic groups that span across multiple continents and areas. So it's not just referring to just one group of people in one area. It is those who are inhabit the land from the earliest times, or the original inhabitants of a land. So yes, the Aboriginals of Australia, they would be the indigenous people of Australia. You have many groups of people. They go by many different names that live in the Americas, the Caribbean, all over the continent of Africa, different parts of Asia, and they are the original inhabitants, the indigenous. So that's what that term means. Now, we know throughout history, people have done a lot of moving around, a lot of migrating, a lot of immigrating, if you will, and have moved to different places and taken on identities of those places, but they're not the original indigenous inhabitants of those places. So this is why we recognize Indigenous Peoples Day, because Indigenous people have a long history on this planet. And not only do we have a long history, we have a lot in common. We have more in common throughout the whole entire diaspora than we have differences. I mean, there are some differences, but we have a lot more in common than we have that makes us different. And one of the things that we have is in common is we have a lot of the same history. The histories of these people is very similar, especially in terms of how we've been affected by colonization and assimilation and systemic racism. And that is something that a lot of us have in common, despite in whatever continent you find yourself on as an indigenous person. You may have faced some of those things. And so to honor today, we are claiming our sovereignty and taking pride in ourselves as indigenous people, because it is very significant. Because at one time you were not allowed to claim sovereignty. You weren't encouraged to be proud of who you were. The US government used to have a policy where they said, we're going to kill the Indian and take the man. And many governments around the world, here, Australia, India, Africa, they had policies under colonial rule and under imperial rule that, the indigenous people's way of life was considered inferior or outdated, and that they were, in order for them to survive, they had to assimilate into the dominant culture and take on the culture, the language, the lifestyle, the religion, the folk ways of the dominant group in order to survive. They weren't allowed to be autonomous. They weren't allowed to maintain their culture and their traditions. And there were efforts to, wipe them out, displace them, through outright genocide or paper genocide, whichever one, and just take away from them their identity, their cultural identity, their history. They were treated as a conquered people, and by being conquered, the dominant group had the right, right that they assumed to rewrite their history or tell them what their history was or give them a new identity, etc. So with that, we all share a common history when it comes to that. And we know a lot of the negatives. We know that as indigenous people throughout the planet, we share a common history of colonization, being enslaved in some places, different forms of slavery, race-based violence, displacement, taking land from people that have been in their families or their nation for thousands of years, or longer. There was ethnic cleansing or genocide. We said that, forced assimilation, miseducation, the breakdown and the breakup of the families, forced sterilization, destruction of their history and their sacred sites and their sacred monuments and traditions, you know, just so much devastation that went on for such a long time. We were living in a time of intense spiritual darkness that disrupted a lot and changed a lot about in people's lives and in their cultures. And so people had to adapt in different ways in order to survive. And some of the ways they adapted were, not so healthy. And the struggle continues. But tonight, let's focus on the resilience and the great things that are happening around the world in for indigenous people now. A lot of progress has taken place in the modern era. I know there's been a lot of devastation in the past, and our people are focusing on healing and claiming their sovereignty, standing in their heritage and reclaiming and revitalizing their languages and their customs and traditions. And that's wonderful. And that is a big step and a big leap forward in the healing process, because the things that were taken away are now being reclaimed by the younger generations and reestablished and just revitalized, okay, so that everyone can maintain their cultures. And it's so much of that now. The struggle to be free and independent continues as we fight to establish our independence and our sovereignty, and to declare that we are a free, proud, and noble people, whatever indigenous group that you come from, because we are. So being sovereign means asserting your right to self-determination and the ability to define yourself. Know thyself, know yourself truly, know who you really are, who your ancestors are, what people you came from, what's their history, what's their story. That's so important to you, because and important to all of us. If you don't know, that is worth getting to know and discovering, who you are, who your ancestors are. You and your ancestors are one, but you want to know who they are and, be able to honor them. And as you honor them, you're honoring yourself, and you carrying on their legacy that they have passed down to you. You want to keep it, continue to keep it going. Search your genealogy, talk to your aunts, your relatives, your oldest relative, to find out what you can find out about your ancestors. Do your own research, especially your genealogy, to find out if you don't know. If you know just a little bit, start there and just dive deeper and discover more. Be like a detective and discover more about your ancestry, your genealogy, your lineage and who you come from and where you come from as well. So that's a form of being sovereign, is reclaiming that especially if it's been lost or unknown to you and your family. Um, and if you're not, someone who can claim or know if you have any indigenous roots, then, just honor indigenous people. Every area that you live in, there was someone there before who was the indigenous inhabitants of the land, recognizing them, making sure that their sacred sites are honored, um, making libation for them. If there's a monument for them, making sure that's honored and kept intact. If there's no monument, making sure that there is one, or there's some kind of remembrance for the people that were in that area. You can join and support groups that help people with getting their land back, getting their recognition. Some people feel like they don't need, recognition from the state or the government. They know who they are, and they have a proud history and knowledge of self. But then there are other groups who are fighting for recognition from the state or the federal government or wherever they live. Help them with that. Make donations to indigenous groups that are doing positive things in their community to help with their healing, help them with establishing independence, help them with establishing revitalization of their culture, revitalization of their languages, their traditions, things like that you can do to show your support and show your help. And just honoring and acknowledging them, always acknowledge those that are indigenous and native to the area that you're in with any kind of ceremony and things like that. So being a sovereign means asserting your right to self-determination and the ability to define yourself. And that is what a lot of us are doing now in this day and time, is defining ourselves, discovering who we are, and healing, because there's a lot of healing that needs to take place on an individual level as well as a collective level. And part of the healing process is to know thyself, just like a tree that grows tall and has branches. What keeps the tree anchored in Mother Earth are its roots. The roots run deep. And so we are like the tree. We're like the branches of the trees. And I would say the trunk of the tree is, our living family, or members of our group. And then the roots that run deep would be the ancestors. So you want to make sure that you are like that tree. That's why when you um write down, your ancestors, or who you descended from, if it's in the form of something called a family tree. So this is why you want to honor and acknowledge them, and make sure that you're defining yourself based on who you are as a person and who you are in your community, whatever your community may be, who you are in that community. We all have a special part to play in our group. And if you don't have a special part, then maybe you should get more involved in some way and in some capacity to help with the self-determination and process, and to help with getting freedom and independence and equality for your group. Make sure you possessing power over yourself. Start with self, start with you, and then you can connect to the larger group. Okay. So we all went through this period of this intense spiritual darkness and destruction, and now we're moving into this era. As we move into we're in the age of Aquarius, and this new era that we're in, of spreading supreme light and freedom, justice, equality, and restorative justice. You hear a lot of this now: restorative justice, racial justice, environmental justice, things that were not honored or even considered in the past. now people are talking about these things and fighting to get freedom and independence for these and recognition of these things, because for a long time people of color were, or indigenous people, I said, we'll say consistent, indigenous people's rights and their voices were not honored and were not heard. And so now there's great movements around that are, making governments acknowledge them and consider them and just listen to them and give them a voice. And so in order to keep that movement going, we all have to work a little harder with that. Many of us wait for a leader to come to lead us and to guide us and to be the spokesperson or the mouthpiece for us. We're looking for some of us are looking for this, Messiah figure, this person to come and save us and to, make all things right. But we have to recognize that we are that leader that we're looking for. We are that savior or that Messiah that we're looking for. And collectively together, we can all be that. If it's a group of us that are striving to get our land back or get recognition or to get reparations or freedom from medical apartheid or freedom, food justice or just, racial justice in general, or we want, if it's a group of us that people that want, you know, environmental hazards to stop in their community, stop their, rainforest from being burnt down or their community from being contaminated, or if they want, freedom or justice or whatever it is that, the struggle is, because I mean, the struggle is real. Whatever the struggle is, if we come together as a group, there's strength in our unity, and together we can be those leaders, we can be those saviors or that Messiah to help and to help us gain the freedom and the sovereignty that we are looking for. Instead of waiting on someone else to do that and give it to us, this is the time. The time is right, family, to take it and to do it on our own. Only our eyes can cry tears for us. And, we have to be the ones that fight for and continue to struggle and demand what we want: the freedom, the justice, the equality, the fair treatment. It's up to us to come together. That's, to unite. That's what a union is, like how farmers have a union. Well, we have to unionize and unite and to come together. I think there's more strength in our unity. You can accomplish a lot more when it's a group of us, and there's so much talent in our indigenous communities, and there's so much talented, gifted people. There's people who are attorneys or people who have knowledge of financial literacy, people who have knowledge of how the government works, or what policies and programs and legislators work. And, we can come together and make things happen and make changes in our own community. If we see a need that needs to be addressed, that's something that we can create our own task force, create our own coalitions, and we can do that. That is what our ancestors did. When there was a need, there was groups of people who worked together to do certain things. If some tribal groups, ethnic groups, the people chose someone to be their chiefs, male or female, and then the chiefs were chose a king or a queen, and the person wasn't chosen because of their financial status. They were chosen because of the works that they did and what they did to serve the community, because to be a leader is a servant of the people. And so the people who were fought valiantly in wars, or the people who honored the tribe, helped people in times of conflict, organized and were active in their community, those were the people that were chosen to be leaders. They were chosen for their leadership skills and their serving of the people and the common good for the whole group skills. They weren't chosen because of a popularity or, whatever superficial things. That's not what matters. What matters is how they served and helped the people so that we can all get ahead and so that we can all work together. And so that's what we should be striving to do at this time as Indigenous people. There's so many issues that need addressing worldwide. I talked to a lot of people. I was working in environmental justice and racial justice. So just talking to a lot of people as I did the community outreach and engagement, and then also the work that I do in some of the other communities working with native groups, and others. It's a lot of need out there. It's a lot of things that need addressing, and we need the power and the strength to do that, and find a good cause to get to be involved in, and help that. If you have a lot of homeless veterans in your group or your ethnic group or whatever, maybe start some kind of organization or support an organization that helps them. If you have a lot of poverty or whatever the issue is, because there's lots of issues and there's lots of causes that need support and help. And like I said, we can do it together. We can help pull each other up and lift one another up. It's a lot of stuff that, like I started the beginning of today's show talking about the negative things, especially in the past, and some of that stuff is still happening in the present. And in order to move forward, we really need to help each other heal and help lift each other up. They divided and conquered us, and now we need to unite and prosper, because that is the best way we will succeed. Okay. So reclaiming our power, and and all over the world, we are reclaiming our power, and we're reclaiming our sovereignty and our independence. If you have been listening or keeping up with the news, you know that there's a lot of countries and elsewhere who, in particular West Africa, a few countries have declared total independence from um, European powers and European governments, and they are asserting their freedom and from colonial rule and colonial influence. And yes, it came with sacrifice. There's been, retaliation from the dominant country that was exploiting their resources, but nevertheless, the people are holding strong and determined to be free and independent. And we should, other countries, we should follow suit and support them. When we see someone, declaring their sovereignty and, claiming it from another group, support them and help them to get through dealing with economic sanctions or whatever type of retaliation. Support one another, be each other's backbone, be each other's support. And so there's a lot of that going on right now. People claiming independence, people protesting all over the world, demanding change. And one of the change they're demanding is an end to tyranny and an end to injustices. People are practicing their ceremonies, their ancestral ceremonies, like never before, um, which is a great thing, because they see that there's strength and power and, us in these ceremonies, and they want to reclaim it. And also there's a sacredness, a sacred power in these ceremonies that and many people, especially in the modern world, who are facing things like depression or confusion and sadness and anxiety. They know that these sacred ceremonies help put you in touch with your soul, with your ancestors, with higher forces and this the natural world. And so they're reclaiming that and they're practicing these things again. There's many movements throughout the earth of people revitalizing their languages. A friend of mine was working with the Nubian people of Eastern Africa who are focusing on revitalizing and preserving their language. And there are people elsewhere who are doing the same thing, revitalizing, restoring, and preserving these ancient languages, because there's a lot of ancient languages that have gone extinct. No one speaks them anymore, or there's just a handful of speakers. And if they don't write the words down or record them, in years from now, as the number of people speak them gets smaller and smaller, those languages will be lost in time. And so there's a lot of people who are working to preserve these languages, making apps, in fact, to tutor you or to teach you these languages. Schools are being established around the world, even some that are online, where people are trying to preserve their languages and teach it to others and the younger generations so that the language will stay intact. And language is very important because it's not only a way people express themselves verbally, but language has a culture of its own. And, in order to understand a person's culture, you have to know something of their language. And so the language is something that really connects people. And so it's very important that it's preserved and saved. And also, another word about the languages, a lot of these languages, especially some of the really ancient ones, are like um are like light languages, like the languages are carry a frequency, high vibrations, high frequencies. That's why a lot of chants and mantras are used in other ancient languages, like Sanskrit, just to name a few. That's the first one that came to my mind. But a lot of these ancient languages and ceremonies are done in these ancient languages because of the frequency and the vibration that they carry. And it's so important. And we know that sound heals, sound restores things, sound activates things. So it's very important that we preserve these languages. Also, many people are around the world are reclaiming their land that was taken from their ancestors, or their ancestors may have been displaced from them, and for their safety, they had to leave, and others took the land from them and established cities and towns over their ancient homelands or their sacred sites. And so many people are reclaiming that. And as we look at the climate change that's taking place on our beloved planet right now, you will see that as a lot of rivers and lakes dry up, it's revealing land and ancient monuments and ruins that some of which have been forgotten through time. And so people are reclaiming them and acknowledging them and making them sacred sites. And so a lot of the land that was taken is being, demanded back, or people are establishing and looking to establish their original homelands, which is very important as well for people to have a place that they can call their own in their own homeland. So all of those things are taking place right now. I've also noticed a movement in the Native community. A lot of Native women are a lot of indigenous women, not just in the Native American community, but also the sisters in New Zealand, amongst the Maori, a lot of women are adorning themselves with their traditional tattoos that were used to identify them. So the chin tattoos, some of the other traditional markings that they put on their bodies, which have a great significance. And these ceremonies were banned at one particular time, and this was not allowed. And now a lot of women are reclaiming it. They're practicing this with their daughters and their granddaughters and nieces. It's becoming a rite of passage for women again, which I think is awesome, because we really need that rite of passage to prepare us for the world and for adulthood. That'll be a whole nother show though. But I see that there's a revitalization of that. I'm seeing more and more people with that, and it's just a beautiful way to connect to their culture and their ancestors. And you're seeing this a lot more now than before. So like I said, there's a lot of wonderful things that are happening in indigenous communities and for indigenous people. And so it's not all doom and gloom. It's not all, you know, just the conquered and the, the unconquered and all of that. It's not just that, not just about colonization and, what was taken away. Yes, that happened, but there's also a lot that we are calling to ourselves, and we're reclaiming, and we are just very, pushing through the trauma and the pain and the PTSD, and we are standing in our sovereignty, and we'll, the self-preservation spirit is strong in us. And so we have a proud history of resilience, and the present. We're very resilient. We're showing the resilience in all these revitalization and these independence movements. We're a people with not only a proud history of resilience, but strength and dignity, civilization building, and all its contributions, all the contributions that indigenous people have made to the modern world. And those acknowledged and not acknowledged, we know what they are, and we know that we're just a proud, noble people, and our nobility runs deep. So with that said, I hope everyone is having a wonderful Indigenous Peoples Day. And we know Indigenous Peoples Day is every day. It's a great day and a time to be alive, a great time to be Indigenous, and honor yourself during this time as you honor others. So with that said, I hope this was a positive message to each and every one of you. Please give me some feedback in the comments. I appreciate and love each and every one of you, and the positive feedback that I give you all, and the information that you share with me on my Instagram page at Astral Healing Arts and at the Healing Cypher Show. So I appreciate that. Peace and love, everyone, and may you be surrounded by joy, peace, happiness, and abundance and good health this week.